You have the slides ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. Great. Well, hello, everybody. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to this WTO Public Forum event on inclusive innovation and technology, enablers for the sustainable future trade. My name is Adam Semensky. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Board of Trustees at King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Riyadh. We're known as CAPSARC. I served as the president of CAPSARC for almost 4 years. And before that, I was the head of the Energy Information Administration in Washington, D.C. For many years, I worked as an energy and commodities analyst in investment banking, both in New York and London, as well as Washington, D.C. Let me tell you a little bit about CAPSARC. We're a leading think tank in energy economics and sustainability with a mission to advance Saudi Arabia's energy sector and inform global policies through evidence-based advice and applied research. We have international experts from 24 countries who collaborate with their peers around the world to share knowledge and insights that touch on all aspects of energy. The University of Pennsylvania ranks CAPSARC in the top quintile of global energy and natural resource think tanks. Now, a little bit about the World Trade Organization. I know that all of you know this, but perhaps there's some in the audience that aren't familiar. It's the premier international organization dealing with global trade rules. Its main function is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly and predictably and freely as possible. This is critical to human well-being because international trade enables consumers to benefit from a wider variety of goods and services and allows companies to grow their businesses in new markets. Importantly, world trade has been shown to encourage faster technological progress, something that's crucial to managing climate and environmental challenges. The technologies needed to reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove greenhouse gas emissions from our environment must be deployed affordably and widely. Sustainable and inclusive innovation and technology is focused on delivering practical solutions to address social, economic, and environmental challenges like we've just discussed, including climate, in a multi-generational context. Such innovation presents enormous potential for advancing sustainable global trade via new goods and services, improved technology, and the exchange of ideas. Similarly, global trade and rule-based multilateralism can contribute to innovation and technology by removing trade barriers, developing standards, protocols, and enhancing intellectual property rights, and advancing transparency. So let's talk now about this session. We will be exploring the beneficial aspects of interdependency between global trade and innovation, including the policies needed by governments to spur innovation, ameliorate trade-offs, and enable new frameworks like the circular carbon economy that was endorsed at the G20 summit in Riyadh last November. The G20 leaders applauded the CCE as a voluntary, holistic, integrated, inclusive, pragmatic, and complementary, I love all those adjectives, approach that could promote economic growth while simultaneously enhancing environmental stewardship. The G20 leaders felt that this was an important thing for all nations, not just the G20. To address these important issues, we have assembled a diverse panel of experts to highlight key facets of innovation, technology, and global trade. Dr. Eric Williams is the Senior Climate Advisor at CAPSARC. He has over 20 years of experience as an energy and environmental economist focusing on climate change policy, energy systems analysis, mitigation, and adaptation options. Before joining CAPSARC in 2018, Eric worked as an economist with the North Carolina Utilities Commission. He was also a consultant at the OECD and the United Nations. We were going to have Khalid Al-Balif, who's unable to join us today because of last-minute commitments in Milan as the Kingdom's lead climate negotiator. But we are extremely delighted to welcome today Dr. Farid Al-Asaleh, who is the Senior Advisor to His Royal Highness the Saudi Minister of Energy. Since 2010, Farid has been Saudi Arabia's lead on energy issues for the G20, Fareed served as an international policy senior advisor at the Ministry of Energy and at Saudi Aramco. He covered finance, investment portfolio management, industrial, local development, and then planning and operations logistics. Dr. Fahad Al-Sharehi is the Vice President for Energy Efficiency and Carbon Management at SABIC. SABIC is Saudi Arabia's multinational chemical manufacturing company. He joined SABIC in 1990, and since 2019, he has been serving as the VP for Efficiency and Carbon Management with a strong focus on technology innovation. Dr. Al-Sharehi has contributed to the invention, development, and commercialization of technologies being used at SABIC. Dr. Maha Gabani is the legal advisor for the permanent mission of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to the WTO. She has served in this capacity since 2013 and has an impressive record of experience in trade policy review, trade services, e-commerce, investment, environmental issues, and government procurement. For more than 2 decades, Dr. Maha has worked in a variety of important business, government, and academic organizations. So we're going to start off with a presentation by Eric Williams. So Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Adam, for the opportunity to speak today on circular carbon economy and technology. Fareed, can you go to the next slide, please? So I just want to start off about circular carbon economy, give you a little bit of background. So experts largely agree that the challenge of achieving the Paris Agreement climate goals requires the pursuit of all options that can manage greenhouse gas emissions. And the circular carbon economy is an extension of the idea of the circular economy. It emphasizes the holistic approach of the 3 R's from the circular economy: reduce, reuse, and recycle, and adds a 4th R for remove. And together, these 4 R's are used to address emission reductions and to manage those emissions. The CCE is a useful framework for understanding how emissions can be managed and for visualizing how emission reduction options are interrelated. The CCE approach preserves and promotes economic growth while also enhancing environmental stewardship through focusing on emissions in all sectors, including energy production and consumption, industry, and agriculture. The CCE embraces global trade of energy and technologies. Next slide. So this slide is a very high-level visual representation of what circular carbon economy is. So in the center of the picture is the circular economy of goods and services. And then outside that circle, we have energy efficiency, renewables, bioenergy, and nuclear that serve to reduce emissions and to avoid those emissions from being created in the first place. And then for the emissions that are created through the use of hydrocarbons, those emissions can be captured, and then they can be removed to geologic storage, or they can be reused in useful ways that feeds back into the circular economy. And then for emissions that do go to the atmosphere, those emissions can be also removed from the atmosphere through direct air capture, and also through photosynthesis, which generates additional natural sinks, which can then be recycled into bioenergy and back into the circular economy again. Next slide. I've been working on a model. It's an energy systems model, an economic model for optimizing the CCE, or MOXIE, as it's called shorthand. And MOXIE was developed to model the global energy system and various pathways to manage carbon emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions. And MOXIE finds the least cost solution that preserves and promotes economic growth while enhancing environmental stewardship. And it includes solutions in all energy producing and consuming sectors. And through our work with MOXIE, we've found that the least cost way to reach emission goals includes a global energy mix with all sources of energy, including hydrocarbons, and with international trade and carbon reductions, so that the best options for managing emissions are implemented where they are the most effective and best suit local circumstances. Next slide. Fareed. So there are a number of key technology emission reduction pathways that can be pursued. And these pathways are all represented in MOXIE as well. And they really rely on advanced technology and technology innovation. And so some of these key pathways are removal. Emissions can be removed from industry and the atmosphere with advanced technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and direct air capture. Hydrogen, both blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, can play a key role in reducing emissions from hard to abate sectors. Next slide. Bioenergy can also play a key role in reducing emissions in hard to abate sectors via biofuels and synthetic fuels. And then shifting toward renewables and electrification of other end uses is another way to manage emissions. Next slide. Last year, as Adam mentioned, the G20 summit endorsed the concept of circular carbon economy, and CAPSARC worked with the International Energy Agency, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the Nuclear Energy Agency, the OECD, and the Global CCS Institute to develop a guide to the circular carbon economy that was delivered to the G20. And this guide can be found at www.cceguide.org if you're interested in learning more. And it's really a series of reports that provides practical information for policymakers. And there's going to be a new study on global energy modeling analysis that will be published later this year at cceguide.org. And to conclude, the circular carbon economy is a holistic approach to greenhouse gas management that can guide domestic and international efforts toward more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable systems. The CCE provides a useful way to understand a broad range of climate change mitigation options and how they interconnect. The CCE can offer a suite of technologies across all sectors that can provide added value by utilizing emissions, such as to create synthetic fuels, to improve concrete and other construction materials, to enhance oil recovery, and to serve as a precursor in the chemical industry. And with that, I want to thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. I think that the points that you made were really important. I just want to emphasize a few of those. That the circular carbon economy framework is really an extension of the circular economy that has been around and well regarded for a long time, looking at ways to make sure that we minimize the impact of materials flows in the environment, and that what we're now looking at is how to minimize carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions. The part about CCE that I think was very attractive to the G20 leaders was that it advocated for all options. It saw renewables and efficiency as very important, as well as nuclear power. That recycle and reuse activities were that we'll hear more about in a bit are also very important, but that ultimately we will not be able to get to the Paris Agreement goals without a very active remove, whether it's biological removal or direct air capture or other ways of dealing with carbon dioxide and removing or storing that part of the waste stream. Our next talk is going to come from Fareed Al-Asaleh. Fareed, I believe that you're prepared to make some remarks now in place of Khalid Al-Walid.
Sure. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I'd really like to commend you in putting this panel together. First of all, no doubt the environmental goods and services, as well as low emissions technologies, represent a huge potential for global trade. Similarly, the global trade systems can play a key enabler role in advancing sustainability. And clearly, there is an interdependency, as mentioned by Adam here. To government representatives, the question is, what can a policymaker do in this context to stimulate sustainable development through innovation? I'd like to really focus on 4 different areas. First, technological innovation. We all know how important technological innovation is for us to achieve Paris Agreement goals, SDG goals, protect biodiversity, all of this while lifting millions out of poverty and allowing economic prosperity. If we look at the various IEA projections, a huge portion of the greenhouse gas savings beyond 2040 comes from technologies which are not commercially or technically feasible today. Safe to say, technology innovation is paramount for the global climate aspirations and economic development. Look at how quickly we came up with a vaccine for COVID-19. It amazes me as a person what can be achieved if we put our heads together. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has long been a firm champion of technology innovation as a key to climate change challenge. Now, policymakers need to create environment conducive to technology breakthrough. One way of doing that is sending a clear and a long-term signal to the market. Government needs to clearly articulate technologies needed by Paris Agreement goals relevant to its local circumstances. In our case, for example, we have a huge potential in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So as we have earlier focused on innovation on CCUS technologies at both private and public levels. As a government, we have supported international cooperation platforms, specially dedicated to CCUS, encouraged our national flagship private companies to research and innovate. Second element is the investment flows. The entire financial sector is going through transformation driven by climate concerns. The ESG trends is focusing attention on impacts beyond profit and losses. What we witness in some cases is the tendency to understand the role of clean hydrocarbons. For example, some of the ESG criteria biased against CCUS in oil and gas sector, which is not sustainable. We need to encourage investors to support all technologies and all low emission solutions. This is especially needed in hard to abate sectors such as petrochemicals, steel, cement, aluminum, with long investment cycles. As governments, we need to de-risk these investments so that they are safe in the next 20, 30 years. This could be through lower tax regime, tax rebates, less of the red tape, regulations. One of the most wonderful tools is long-term strategies. We will talk about this later. Direct engagement with investment community through trade missions and road shows. The third element is the regulatory frameworks. The third component of policy perspective is about creating a supportive regulatory framework. Development and enforcement of standards, protocols, protection, and enhancing intellectual property rights. All of these are necessary to connect the dots between innovation and sustainability. I don't want to be theoretical here, so let me give you a concrete example. Clean hydrogen is a talk of the town. It suddenly became a top priority in climate change and energy agenda. Due to a dependency on renewables and CCUS technologies, blue and green hydrogen industry is very much a case of international global trade. Strong demand in one country and supply in the other turn hydrogen into a global commodity. The challenge is the lack of standards, perhaps, and protocols for entire supply chain. This impedes the cross-border trade, investments, and other elements. To address this issue, among others, Saudi Arabia has set up a formal partnership with German government. We are working to create a consistent and harmonized regulatory framework for production, storage, transportation, and finally, international trade. The last element is the strategic long-term outlook. We need to keep a big picture in sight. As a government, how do you collaborate all of the options in your hand to minimize trade-offs? How do you capitalize on your national strengths and capabilities? What course of actions will enhance your economic competitiveness? Which set of guiding principles can you use? In the context of climate change, we are thinking very hardly and decided to look at one particular concept which turns GHG emissions into value. Eric has already explained the CCA concept. As a policymaker, I want to point out that the beauty of the circular carbon economy is a combination of the four levers of the reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove. Provides flexibility in choosing the optimum solution fit for the different contexts in different countries and sectors, capitalizing on strengths and minimizing costs. In November 2020, Adam had already made a reference. Following the G20 leaders endorsed the CCE, the custodian of the two holy mosques had announced the launch of Saudi Arabia's CCE national program, along with other programs and initiatives. It lays down the foundation for the kingdom's contribution to Paris Agreement goals. For us, it serves as an umbrella for all of our efforts. It sets a long-term signal to investors, innovators, businesses, regional government agencies. Thus, we all move in the same direction. I want to conclude by highlighting a concrete example of how we turn a waste into basically a source. This was done a long time ago. In 1970s, we set up a master gas system plan that converted associated gas from waste to valuable feedstock for our petrochemical industry, surrounding economic growth, opening up new jobs, all while reducing GHG emissions. This industry had created two industrial cities on both sides of the kingdom, which now contributes to about 40% of the industrial GDP. This was actually the circular carbon economy in place. With that, I thank you very much for that. Turn back to you, Adam.
Thanks very much, Fareed. That point that you made about the master gas system is really kind of interesting to me, because at the climate summit that was held by President Biden back in April, they had the idea of forming something called the Net Zero Producers Forum. And Saudi Arabia was an original signatory to that, along with Canada, Norway, Qatar, and the United States. And one of the key things that they talked about was methane abatement. They liked the idea of the circular carbon economy, but they also recognized that methane abatement was going to be critical for all producers. And the track record that Saudi Arabia has had in controlling methane is among the best in the world, and that's been shown by independent studies. I think that was part of the master gas system. The other thing that I wanted to mention in response to your comments was that there is a group here in the kingdom that's looking at different technologies that could be applied. Real projects are underway, I think you said, Fareed. There were over 100 technologies or projects that were looked at. There were 57 that were considered big enough to really to look at. 36 of those were prioritized. in the reduce, reuse, recycle, and remove area. And then another filtering screen was done to say, well, what are the kinds of things that could really make a difference in the kingdom and might make a difference globally? And that included big projects underway in energy efficiency and liquid displacement, in green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, CO2 for industries, and including CO2 to chemicals and e-fuels, and then many things in the nature-based solutions area. And I want to come back to the idea of the kinds of things that are really underway, where capital is being invested in a significant manner in reuse and recycle. And we are delighted to have Fahad El-Sharahi from SABIC, who can lead us through some of the things that are being done at SABIC in the reuse and recycle area. So Fahad, over to you. You're going to have to come off mute, Fahad.
Thank you, Adam. First of all, I'd like to thank Fareed and the team to give us the opportunity to participate with you today and to share with you how important the sustainability for our business, and also how the circular carbon economy is a potential enabler to address the challenges in the future. Just what Fareed said in the beginning, that SABIC is started with as a sustainability story, where all the gases he mentioned, it is collected and converted to valuable product, where now position SABIC as a global company ranked number 3 in the world. And this is one of the advantage of the sustainability story there. So sustainability for us, as you can see from the slides, it is aligned with our core values and ambition. And it is something that provides a way to meet our ambition for economical growth, and while maintaining our environment and social needs. Also, it helps us in addressing, which you are aware of, the mega trend that facing the world when it comes to the population, the climate, the energy needs, material scarcity. So it's helping us big time in addressing those mega trends. If you move to the next slide. So I think the name of the game here is turning challenges into opportunities. And our industry and our business facing with many challenges. And as you can see it in the slide, starting from the global as well as the regional regulation requirement, our customer investor expectation, also the technology and the disruptive and the innovation, as well as the need and increasing demand for more disclosure. How to mitigate this? I mean, there are a couple of things which is relevant to some of the companies and some of the businesses, like, for example, having or establishing a strategic driver to establish it. There should be a very clear link between the target and the regulation, accountability, data management, also cost versus the opportunities, short term versus long term. So this is a kind of general guidelines how to address those challenges and how to turn challenges into opportunity. If you go to move to the next. So that's why we are seeing, to address these challenges, the circular carbon economy as a comprehensive framework. We need a solution, we need enablers, and we see the 4R elements stated here in the slides, provide the platform and wide options, because we are looking for a solution. And as you can appreciate the challenge, there is no one solution that can fit all. So you need multiple solutions, and it depends where you are operating, which region, your competitive advantage, your infrastructure, availability of some of the resources that you need. So we found the framework of circular carbon economy is the right platform, so can help the business community to address the climate challenges. And it is inclusive. It's not taken as biased to one of the options. It depends where you're operating, what business you are in, then you can leverage the different option demonstrated here. I think in the coming slides, I will share with you some of the example that demonstrating the concept. I will start, for example, with the renewable energy. As you can appreciate, that renewable energy, it will help in reducing, especially the scope 2 when it comes to the emission. And also we already putting a roadmap here to be 100% renewable. We already started leveraging also the renewable energy availability in Saudi Arabia and also elsewhere to get access to the renewable energy. Next. This is one of the examples that we have in one of our plants in Spain, in Cartagena, where we are moving, or will be one of the first chemical plant to move the energy source to be renewable. And we signed the agreement with one of the power provider, so we get access and it will be the first plant doing it. The renewable energy also will be very helpful to decarbonize some of the technology, very difficult to decarbonize, and this is a collaboration, and this is where it shows the importance of that people, they need to work together, like we are working with one of our competitors like BASF and also the technology provider to develop a new technology for the cracker, which is one of the major emitter when it comes to the petrochemical. This will be reducing the emission by 90%, leveraging the renewable energy. Another example of reduce and creating also solution for the world, for our customer, is the blue hydrogen. We were able with our colleague in Aramco, as well as with the Japanese, to demonstrate the supply chain for the blue ammonia. It is the first shipment where the ammonia produced in Jubail, the equivalent amount of the emission already sequestrated, and another which is converted to a valuable product like the methanol, and we ship it to Japan. And this is, we prove that the supply chain, this is something doable, and we are looking now to scale it up to the next level. Another example, which is in our assets in UK, where there is a project there for having the sequestration hub, where we, instead of using, for example, the case that I mentioned earlier, using renewable energy, we can use here hydrogen to decarbonize the cracker there in UK, getting the blue hydrogen. And this is where demonstrate, different region, different places, based on the competitive advantage and resources available, you can address the climate challenges in a different way, and also in more competitive way. If we move to the next. This is another, for example, the circularity solution enabler for the reduce, which is related, as most of you are aware, about the plastic recycling, where we are creating our brand True Circle, where we are addressing plastic recycling, and we are pioneer. If we move to the next slide, Farid, for the chemical recycling, because most of the recycling is today done through the mechanical. We are addressing the chemical recycling, where we are bringing the polymer to its origin and use it as a feed, and this will help in the reduce part, and also will address the issue related to the plastic. The second, and this is what again, the collaboration in Saudi Arabia, we are working with the flagship in Saudi Arabia for recycling. Also, with first demonstration, it will be done in Europe, where we will use the recycling the plastic and put it back into our cracker. One of our flagship, where we are pioneer, the first or the largest CO2 capturing and utilization plant. This is in our Jubail, where we are capturing the CO2 from the glycol plant, and we convert it to a valuable product, as you can see in the slides here, where it can go into different sectors, going from the chemicals all the way going to the food industry. So this is the capacity of the plant, 500,000, and it's equivalent, as you can see, of planting 11 million tree, and it goes in different sector. If you go to the next slide, this is the benefits of also the CO2. It will go to urea, where it is a source of life, where it is a fertilizer that can help in increasing the agriculture yield. Next. This is also another thing that the urea can be used also in addressing some of the emission related to the NOx, for the heavy truck. This will be a very helpful in addressing, the source of emission. It's now helping to address environmental issue. If you move to the last part, which is we are happy and to be recognized during the G20 by the custodian of the Hormone, part of his speech, considering or mentioning our plant. Not only this, if you go to the next slide, we through the collaboration with the UK, our plant is considered part of the pioneering case study, part of the UK decarbonization roadmap, and we are helping and supporting in that direction. Just to summarize, I think it is something very important that addressing the climate change and the sustainability, there will be no one can do it alone. It needs a collaboration between the business as well as with the regulator. Technology will play a major role here when I'm talking here about the deployment as well as the scalability. Policy framework is something very helpful, and having a predicted policy and regulation, this will help for the incentive, taking into consideration the different regional advantage and availability of resources to help in addressing this issue. So with this, I would like to finish my speech and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Fahad. Eric started off with mentioning pathways, a plural word, pathways forward towards balanced carbon emissions. Some people use the term net zero. And Fahad just gave us a great set of examples of real programs underway based on the circumstances that exist in Saudi Arabia, and was showing us concrete examples of activities that are already underway that are making progress in this area. What Fareed indicated was that this kind of international cooperation is going to be critical, I think, moving forward. And I'm just absolutely thrilled to know that some of the criticisms that I hear about the idea of adding reduce to the circular economy, that people say, well, it's greenwashing. Well, in fact, it's not, it's real. And each of these options is going to be required, I think, to move forward. So we're really, really lucky and delighted to have as our final speaker, Dr. Maha Gabani, who, as I mentioned before, is in Geneva. She's the legal advisor for the permanent mission of the kingdom to the WTO. And she's going to help us out with some of the key trade ideas that are important to the WTO and will be important to dealing with this emissions and climate challenge as we go forward. So over to you, Dr. Maha.
Thank you, Adam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to join my colleagues here in thanking the WTO Secretariat for organizing this public forum. I also thank the speakers before me for their informative presentations. It's hard to be the last speaker, especially after all what we have heard about the impacts of sustainable and inclusive innovation and technology on markets, products, and policies, while focusing on delivering practical solutions to address social, economic, and environmental challenges. First slide, please. My presentation here will connect the dots between trade, technology, environment, and development. In line with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the intersection of environmental trade and technological innovation contributes to making production and consumption more sustainable and economies more prosperous and resilient to environmental risks. On the one hand, technological progress can enhance the impacts that trade has on the environment through the creation and adoption of new products, new productive process, or new technologies that helps tackling important environmental challenges. Circular carbon economy is a very good example of the nexus between trade, technology, environment, and development. The CCE addresses emissions by transforming all emissions challenges into opportunities by fully utilizing all technologies and innovations to turn emissions from waste to value. On the other hand, the multilateral trading system with the WTO in its core, through its objective of opening markets and removing trade barriers, lead to the international deployment and dissemination of highly varied technologies, including those who help having simultaneous positive environmental impacts. Having said that, encouraging multilateral cooperation and strengthening local, national, and international environmental policies will help trade to contribute to innovative technological solutions and ensure that trade promotes a shift towards more inclusive and sustainable ways of consuming and producing. The preamble of Marrakesh Agreement establishing the WTO emphasizes the linkage between trade, environment, and development. Deliberation and proposals within WTO framework are essential for enhancing this nexus between trade, environment, technology, and development. Next slide, please. Since its accession to the WTO, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia participates actively in the work of the Committee of Trade and Environment and its negotiating special sessions, and keen to highlight the impact of the reduction and elimination of tariff on environmental goods on facilitating global trade that contributes to economic growth while addressing environmental challenges. In November 2029, the Kingdom has submitted to the Committee of Trade and Environment Special Session a proposal on reduction or elimination of tariffs on environmental goods list. In December 2009, the Kingdom has proposed a list of certain environmental goods of importance for the energy sector. These goods relate to carbon capture and storage technologies, gas flaring emission reduction technologies, and efficiency technologies. The Kingdom also recognizes the importance of the elimination of non-tariff barriers on environmental goods from policy perspective, with minimum requirements that facilitates market access, which is equally important to contribute to liberalization of goods and services. In July 2010, the Kingdom has submitted a proposal to include certain types of NTBs, such as standards, conformity assessment and certification, labeling schemes, and intellectual property on environmental goods for discussion and elimination pursuant to the mandate of paragraph 31.3. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we need to emphasize here that the comprehensive CCE framework utilizes and advances inclusive technology innovation as a key enabler for sustainable global trade. Also, it provides an opportunity to transfer emissions to value and thus contribute to economic prosperity, including unleashing potential business opportunities for international trade and addressing environmental challenges by advancing all innovative technologies. With regard to the way forward, it is extremely important that we all consider the different approaches and frameworks, such as the CCE, which provides suite of technologies, including of direct air capture, carbon capture and utilization, sequestration technology, natural-based solutions to manage emissions to value. We believe that strengthening the nexus of development, technology, trade, and environment will benefit all stakeholders, including technology innovators, users, and producers, which will contribute to generate and advance business opportunities via wider deployment and dissemination of all technological options. From our perspective, we believe that the incorporation of the CCE within the WTO framework will provide a way forward to the inclusive innovation and technology as enabler for sustainable future trade. Lastly, we need to revive the work of the CTE-SS regarding an inclusive approach to liberalization of all environmental technological innovation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maha. We would be delighted, all of us, to answer any questions that anyone has. You can use the chat function to do that. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see if any of the attendees have questions, I'd like to just comment, Maha, that what you've shown is the Saudi commitment to taking concrete actions goes all the way back to 2009 and probably even before that. And I noted that Fareed mentioned that the kingdom was one of the first to sign the Paris Agreement in 2015. So this is not new, and I believe the commitment that's being shown by the kingdom here is real. Maha, I actually wanted to start with you. What are the mechanisms, or is there a mechanism at the WTO to help move this concept of the circular carbon economy beyond Saudi Arabia, beyond the signatories, Canada, Norway, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, the initial signatories to the Net Zero Producers Forum? How do we convince other countries and even beyond the G20 that the idea of being inclusive and including all of the options, I like to think of it as all of the tools in the toolbox. Can the WTO help with that, and what's the best way to move forward?
Thank you, Eric, for this very important question. It's very interesting. Well, in the WTO, we have the mandate of the CTE, which is to encourage sharing information and sharing experience of the WTO members about the linkage of trade and environment, and of course, the impact on development. We also have other committees in the WTO, always referencing to trade and environment. I give some examples. In the agreement of trade in services, trade in goods, SPS, TBT, we have, and in the development, we have this mandate also to discuss the strong link between trade and environment. What we're suggesting here is to include the CCE in the agendas of the sharing experience in the CTE, and we're also encouraging the CTE-SS, encouraging the reinvigoration and revival of the work in the CTE-SS. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Maha. And that actually goes back to one of the other points that the CCE emphasizes, and that is national circumstances, are really important here. And not every country, obviously, has geologic storage capability for CO2, but most countries can implement efficiency projects And many countries can move forward on things like renewables. Other countries, including Saudi Arabia, I think have great capability in areas like green and blue hydrogen, nature-based solutions, and reuse and recycle kinds of activities, including direct air capture, and so on. And I think it's important, again, to recognize the idea that no one is being excluded from this idea, that we're looking, in a sense, for everything that can add to helping with the solution. Don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution, and then try to find ways to lead in providing solutions is an important, I think, concept. Eric, just order of magnitude and quickly, what's the difference in cost between, in your model, between solutions that where all options can be used and solutions that narrow the option set?
Yeah, basically, if you narrow options like carbon capture and storage, direct air capture, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, if you limit those, you can double the cost globally of meeting CO2 targets.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that because that made me like sit right up in my chair. It could be double the cost to try to look for a single pathway rather than providing for multiple pathways.
Right.
Man, that's
And
that's pretty interesting.
and trade also of reductions keeps costs down as well. And without trade, costs can go up.
Right, and that's certainly an important concept for the WTO. And I do know, and Fareed, let me just segue right into you on this one. Article 6 of the COP26, of the Paris Agreement, and is going to be discussed in Glasgow. And I know that Saudi Arabia has supported the idea of trading in carbon and voluntary systems and so on. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you very much. The Article 6 context is yet to be decided how it's going to be done.
Right.
Definitely looking at the trade concept of it, I think if we really come around and put a value on the emissions, I think that would be a great way forward. Why? Because it provides business opportunities. It brings in together the technology innovators, the users, the producers, and that will entail a cost reduction. That hence it will basically facilitate trade across the globe. So I think if we really capture the idea of the value of that commodity, which the kingdom had done it since the 70s, this will really entail a lot of business opportunity and facilitate trade.
Right, even trade in carbon is a way to lower the costs of doing business, and again, a very important aspect of the situation. Dr. Fahad, I know that there are some projects underway at SABIC for looking at e-fuels. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? Can we actually turn carbon dioxide into a fuel? How do we? I think you're already doing that with methanol, but what's the opportunity set there? This is something that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is opening an opportunity, leveraging the availability of green hydrogen, and also capturing the CO2 from, like, for example, a cement plant or very difficult to abate process. And then you combine both, and then you have a green methanol, and the green methanol converted to the e-fuels. So this is a kind of, that's why I say that this is not only one solution, this is multiple solutions. Then you can bring a new product to the market. It will help, it might be started as a niche in the beginning. And because here is the affordability is something that need to be taken into consideration. You know, some of the technology or some of the product is available today, but always the customer will compare to the alternatives. I mean, how much is cheaper or lower? But I'm sure, I mean, with time, people, they will start to recognize the importance. So instead of saying that I have the offer, the product in the market. It is available in the market, and if the people they have the affordability to buy it and to take it, then it is a win-win situation.
Right. So we're back to, why that's important is we do know that population is still growing. We know that economies are still growing. And looking back in history, we've had transitions before to better, cleaner fuels. But each time that's occurred, we tend to continue to use a number of these fuels that they don't go away. And it's going to be very critical, I think, to deal with the emissions problem. So we're back to, well, why don't we just, isn't there some way to just use all renewables and efficiency and not have fossil fuels? And the problem there is actually pretty straightforward. First of all, there are some areas that are very hard to decarbonize, and you mentioned e-fuels and Eric mentioned biofuels. Aviation is one of those sectors that is going to require innovation in technology and global trade to make that really work. I think that we do know that heavy trucking and marine fuels also fall into that category. You mentioned, Dr. Fahad, cement manufacturing and concrete curing. Metal smelting is another area. We also know that there are equity issues involved in oil. There's still 1 billion people that don't have electricity. We need to find some way to make that happen. We need to honor the UN's Sustainable Development Goal number 7, affordable and reliable, clean, modern energy for everybody. And it's going to take some time to do that. And finally, we have all this infrastructure issue. So there's a lot of things that are going on here. And I think Dr. Maha has shown us that there are mechanisms at the WTO that can allow us to move forward on these things. Well, we're getting very close to, I think, the end. I have not seen any questions come up in the chat. All of us would be delighted to take questions, and we're pretty easy to find, I think, if you just go online. CAPSARC certainly is, and I can pass questions along to any of our panelists today if you have questions. So let me say once again, thank you very much to the World Trade Organization for providing us this opportunity to talk about why innovation and technology is important and why global trade plays a very strong role in helping to provide sustainable solutions to the climate challenges that everybody, including Saudi Arabia, really wish to address in a holistic and pragmatic manner. So again, thank you very much. And please, if you have any further questions, just let us know, and we'd be delighted to help with that. So thank you again to Eric Williams, to Fareed Al-Asaleh, to Fahad Al-Shaheri, and to Maha Gabani at the WTO. Thank you, and good day to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.